playoffs begin here for season 51 of the RTG Tally Challenge. Good evening, everybody. Welcome here as we now begin the postseason. We now know the 10 drivers that are going to be trying to battle for the championship. And once again, we're here at the high banks of Talladega Superspeedway for 66 laps of racing. I'm Seth Cole alongside Zach Freeman. And Zach, this is the first of two races, I should say, for this round. This is basically the race that's going to set the tone for who might be in trouble heading into next week.
Absolutely, Seth. It's good to talk to you. The points have been reset, as you mentioned. Joe DeSpirito, tonight's pole sitter, once again, big surprise there, who left last week's race with about a 48-point lead. We'll see that now with the playoffs trimmed down to 3 points over second place Bob Seminara, Chuck McClure, Grant Wesley, Jessica Shelton, rounding out your current top 5 in points. Shelton now only 12 points back in that 5th position. She is tied with Dante Ricky, who would be in 6th normally. Josh Metallic, Mark Paglia, Bernie Mobbs, Billy Ellis are all guys that we saw fight very hard to make their way into the playoffs, and consistency being their way in as they look forward to round number 1 here tonight. Seth, I think it's going to be a great show.
Definitely. Billy Elliser last week dodged a bullet, was able to salvage a good enough finish to advance here into the playoffs tonight. However, don't think you're going to have that luxury. There's those 10 drivers that are battling in the playoffs, but there's another number of drivers in tonight's field. They want to be able to take a checkered flag, including the driver we're going to talk to here tonight pre-race, and that's the driver of the number 616, I should say, and that is Jerem Lewis. Hey, Jerem, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Yes, indeed. How you doing, bud?
Well, we're doing good. Man, you're getting ready to strap in for 66 laps here at Talladega. We've seen you in the past couple of weeks, really been running up there towards the front, been bringing some really good finishes home. How difficult is it now to be in this race here tonight, knowing that you're going to be surrounded by drivers that are battling for the championship now?
Oh, that's definitely tough, man. I definitely don't want to have any outcome on that. I'm just kind of hoping to go out here and keep my nose clean and hopefully be around in the finish. Maybe at least get another decent finish, if not a win.
Hey, Jerem, it's Zach. Hey, man, last week we saw you with your season-high 10th place finish, first 10th place of the season after a couple weeks where you ran into some unfortunate incidents out on the racetrack. Now, in the drivers' meeting tonight, we heard admins talk to everybody that said, hey, guys, do not roll over for these playoff drivers. So if you find yourself in the correct position with just a couple laps to go, what do you say you do? Do you make a run for it?
Oh, I'm here to win races, boy. That's it.
Well, Jeremy, we wish you the best of luck. We look forward to seeing what you're able to do, as Zach said, coming in with some momentum, your first top 10 last week, and good luck here tonight. Hope to see you up at the front.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hopefully everything goes smooth, and hopefully I don't make too much noise, but thanks a lot. Y'all have a good one.
And one thing I'm wondering coming into tonight's race here, Zach, is how many playoff drivers approach drivers that aren't necessarily battling for the championship saying, I got to keep my playoff hopes alive by having people that are willing to work with me to be able to get a good finish. Do you think any diplomacy went on in the garage area this week or even just tonight?
Well, I think, especially with these super speedways, there's a lot of diplomacy that you're going to see week to week to week. And I don't know if anybody might have, approached anybody personally, but I think everybody has a pretty good understanding of the guys that they know that they like to work with out on the racetrack. For example, we've got the Florida gang, the Joe DeSpirito, the Bob Seminara, the Bernie Mobbs. They run together a lot. Another few cars that we see constantly together making speed out there on the racetrack. So I think if you're one of those non-playoff drivers that usually runs with those guys, I don't think that you run it a whole lot different. Yeah, maybe you'll give them a little bit extra room, just to make sure you don't wipe yourself and them out all at the same time. But I think at the end of the day, anybody that's in contention is going to be going for that win, whether you're in the playoffs or not. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that play out that way at all.
It's interesting. Obviously, we talk to drivers and they say that these races are all about track position, being up at the front, being ahead of the mayhem that happens from the midway portion of the field to the rear of the field. 8 of our top 10 here tonight are playoff contenders, 10 of our top 15 drivers that are battling for the championship. So all 10 championship competitors up there inside of the top 15, and we'll have to see if they stay up there. There is tonight, as we stated, is the first race of the first round. Next week will be the elimination race, and these drivers here tonight are going to be gunning for at least 7th in the point standings. 3 drivers will be eliminated next week.
Yeah, and Seth, I think it's really interesting when you look at the way that the points were when they left last week. Joe DeSpirito picking up that regular season championship. He had a tremendous point lead over second place. Now, I think the last that I saw before points were reset is it was about 48 points. Now, if you look at the difference between first and 10th on the playoff grid right now, Joe DeSpirito in first, Billy Ellisor, who made his way in, as we mentioned earlier, is only 30 points back. So, Joe DeSpirito doesn't have so much to lean on in the way of, what you might call insurance points in the round one of the playoffs tonight. One bad race in the first round of the playoffs could make the season right there.
Certainly could. I want to remind everybody, though, we've been kind of watching, seeing if the defending champ can find victory lane. So far, he's been unsuccessful in the regular season, but 2 of his 3 wins from last year came during the playoffs, including the season finale, and he lines up on the pole position alongside of Bob Seminare. This has been a very familiar-looking front row during the course of this season. Chuck McClure and Bernie Mobbs in row 2. Bob Dixon is the highest-running non-playoff contender. He'll roll off from 5th alongside of Mark Paglia. Completion of the top 10, 7th, Grant Wesley, 8th, Josh Metallic, 9th, Billy Ellisor, and 10th, Donnie Garrett. Jessica Shelton will roll off on the inside of row 6 alongside of 2-time winner Tim Knopfsker. Dante Ricky, who finished out the season with bookends, with bookend wins, he is going to roll off 13th alongside the driver we just talked with, Jerm Lewis. That's row 7. Row 8 will find Jeff Crivello and Chris Elliott. Harry Bond and Wiley Coate in row 9, and completing the top 20, Dave Melson and John Godfrey. Bobby Farrell and Richard Martin, they'll be in row 11. Row 12, Rodney Sullins and Robbie Nisus. Row 13, Glenn Harris and Stefan Martel. Those were the drivers that took time. Row 14 will have Cy Jones and Doug Woolley. And making up the final row, rolling off from 29th and 30th, that'll be Manny D and Chris Emery.
All right, so we've got the playoffs lined up for us. We have the field lined up for playoff race number 1. One thing that we didn't mention yet, we still have the bracket series ongoing. Currently tonight, Bob Dixon will be taking on Grant Wesley, with Chuck McClure taking on the number 28 of Paglia, who is sporting a bit of a different paint scheme tonight as he runs the Fender Ford Mustang. So a couple extra races for you to look at within the chase races themselves. And I think it's Jess Shelton. And who's the top tier in the bracket series right now, Seth? Do you know that right offhand?
I believe that was DeSpirito.
Yeah, so DeSpirito and Shelton both have an off week this weekend, but we'll be back in contention for that bracket soon. So the pace car leads them down into turn 3. Seth, what are you feeling tonight? You think we'll see a repeat winner? Do you think we'll see a new winner? Do you think we'll see a winner that's outside of the playoffs altogether make it into victory lane tonight?
No, my money's on one of our 10 playoff contenders for the main reason we mentioned the fact that if you have a bad night, you're going to have to rely on next week to recover and get up into the top 7. But if you can take the checkered flag here tonight, you're automatically advancing to that round of 7. So I think that there's going to be a huge need for these playoff contenders to be up at the front, be in the conversation on that final lap to be able to win this race, because you want that golden ticket. You don't want to have to rely on 2 races here in this round. You just want to rely on 1.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you with that, Seth. Like I said earlier, you don't want to get yourself off to a bad start and have to be working on trying to dig yourself out of the hole in the second race of the playoffs. So everybody going for all the points they can. Dodge Challenger pace car is in parking at the end of pit lane. Green flag is out. Joe DeSpirito leads the field alongside Bob Seminara down toward turn number 1.
And this is going to be interesting to watch our playoff contenders here tonight as well, because there's the old adage at the super speedways, if you help someone, you're helping yourself. And so some of these drivers, yes, they're battling each other for a championship, but at the same time, they're wanting to keep themselves at the front, wanting to try to get to the race lead, and they're probably going to need the aid of one of the drivers that's trying to battle them for that championship trophy to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And we've seen in the weeks preceding this first chase race tonight, track position seems to be very important. You don't want to find yourself in the middle to the back of the pack, especially if something breaks loose ahead of you. Not a whole lot of time to check up and react. So finding that one person, especially, it gives you a little bit extra comfort knowing that they're a real fast car. There's somebody in the playoffs and there's somebody that's earned their way here. Not bad options to hook up with early in the race.
Got a car already in the wall. That's Donnie Garrett in the 77. I believe he's moving up there because I saw a little bit of connection problems on that first lap for his Chevrolet. So he is dropping to the rear of the field where it's safe. Right now, your top four are all drivers that started on the outside line. Oh, we got a spinners, couple of spinners back there on the back straightaway. Bobby Farrell was one. The other is Stefan Martel.
Stefan Martel with hard rear end impact to that inside wall. I'm not sure. The green lights are still on. It looks as though it was only those two cars involved. So cars still at the front of the pack, clean and green. Everybody lined up pretty single file as they work their way into the tri-oval, led by the 712 Bob Seminara.
Farrell kept it going. I saw him down below the yellow line just in the bottom of the screen there. So I think he and the 57 might have been the two that got together. But as I was going to mention before that incident off of turn two, your top four right now are drivers that started on the outside of their respective rows. I don't know if Joe DeSpirito just didn't get a good start, if he missed his shift or what, but it was like that middle line jumped out in front a lot earlier on a restart than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, well, and it's not the first time, oddly enough, that we've seen Joe DeSpirito be the lead car on that bottom or top line, and for some reason just doesn't quite get up to speed the way that the competitors around him do. So he's got that real bursty short run speed for qualifying, but on the first lap of the race, it seems like it takes a lap or two for that car to get up to speed. Leaders now working their way out of tri-oval. Bob Seminara leading Bernie Mobbs on the low side. Mark Paglia and Josh Metallic on that top side, making a run for the lead into turn one.
712 of Bob Seminara, believe it or not, that was the first couple of laps he has led in the last 3 weeks. We talk about drivers, playoff contenders wanting to have good momentum heading into the championship chase. Well, 2 weeks ago, Bob Seminara had a pedal issue, never was able to get back in the lead lap, and last week he had a problem where he was losing, I think it was third gear, and so his restarts were not quite as good as he would want them to be. So he's had a couple of issues last couple of weeks, certainly hoping it turns around. His luck turns around here tonight, starting off the postseason.
And we do have Chris Emery blowing up out of turn four. He's going to make his way down to the inside of the racetrack. Still clean and green. Leaders now, Bob Seminara on the inside line, Mark Paglia on the outside line. Both cars dragging long lines of traffic behind them. A 200-mile-per-hour pace lap across the line as they work their way out of turn number two. Bob Seminara now with the 1 car length advantage lead over the 90 of Bernie Mobbs on the low side.
Got two Mustangs trying to work together on that outside line with Paglia Metallic. They got Chuck McClure and Tim Knopfsker right behind them. On the inside, you've got 3 Chevrolets of Bob Seminara, Joe DeSpirito, and Grant Wesley, but it's the Dodge of Bernie Mobbs that is splitting them up right now. However, you've got your 3 Florida boys lined up nose to tail right now, trying to edge ahead and clear themselves on that outside line.
And this is something that we've seen all year long. These 3 cars make a lot of speed together, doing really well right now, but it looks like that top line, trying to make some moves, being led by Paglia right now. Grant Wesley will line up on the inside of Paglia, the 4th car in line on the bottom. Also looking at that 143, Bob Dixon in the first Dorito machine, having a really strong run after a good qualifying effort here tonight. He's going to find himself right now in 5th on the bottom side of the racetrack.
And you can see, I guess that top line, I don't know if they're not lined up tight enough or if they're having to lift a little bit more, because I thought they were going to make some headway since there was about 2 car lengths between Grant Wesley and Bob Dixon, but you can see the 143 has drafted right back up to the bumper of the 88 and actually cleared the outside line as well. Shelton following behind him is also going to clear, so the top 6 all clear of that second lane.
Yep, and we're seeing something that we have seen so far, especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks this season. The bottom line that we're talking about right now isn't technically a bottom line. They're running about a groove up on the racetrack just above the first dotted line that's in play on the racing surface, with the top line sharing that wide middle lane with them. But right now, that top line is being led by the 39 of Josh Mattel. It looks like Paglia has dropped down into the bottom line, so we'll see with a new leader on that top line if they can make some progress as they head off into turn 3, but not quite as many cars as what there are on the bottom right now.
Right now, the driver that's running the furthest back of the playoff contenders is Dante Ricky in the 84, right now scored in the 15th position. Of course, winning the final regular season race, and all season long, for the most part, we've seen him not qualify, start towards the back and work his way to the front. When we talked to him in Victory Lane last week, he said, from here on in, we are qualifying. We do not want to be back in the Hornets' nest and have our playoff hopes possibly get caught up in a big one.
Well, qualifying is a really tough beast, especially at this racetrack, because times are so fast and they're so tight. If you're even a tenth off what the pole sitter's time is, you can find yourself in 15th or 16th place at this racetrack. And while Dante, he qualified in the top 15, it wasn't that bad. Right now, he's just stuck on that outside line, and they're not making any progress up toward the front. It looks like the first 9 or 10 cars on the inside have broken away. The final car single file being the 616 of Jerm Lewis, who is now looking low on the racetrack, maybe looking to pick up Jessica Shelton in the 94.
We talked about how close times are in qualifying. Dante Ricky qualified 13th here tonight, 6 100ths off the run that Joe DeSpirito had, and that is a very mediocre margin, folks. That is very, very close. To your point, really, it's an art in qualifying here, and 1,000th can seem like 100th and even like a 10th for some of these drivers, just based on how close the speeds are.
Yeah, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm one of those guys that never quite figured out the art of qualifying at super speedways, so I was pretty used to coming from the back. To Dante Ricky's point, it can be extremely hairy coming through the pack because you don't know what you're going to encounter, when you're going to encounter it, or if you're going to be in a position to make it by cleanly, or if you're going to get swept up in somebody else's mess.
Right now, you've still got a number of your playoff contenders at the front, but we talked about potential spoilers of drivers that maybe could take a checkered flag that are not battling for the championship. That 143 of Bob Dixon has held court up inside the top 5, and was there contact there between Metallic and Paglia?
Yeah, I think there might have been. I think there might have been a little bit of a bumper grab. Josh had to get out of it a little bit. It's going to send him back up to the high side along the 17 of Chuck McClure at this time. But again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 cars on that single file line running right in the middle of the restart before you get back to McClure with the Metallic. Those guys back there have been running 2 and 3 wide for a little while now as they try to get themselves up toward the front, but 3 wide's definitely not going to work. The cars with the best draft are going to be the ones that are able to take advantage of what's going on right now, but the leaders are checking out. You can see there's quite a gap between the cars that are single file back to the cars that are 3 wide, so that makes a lot of difference. You scrub a lot of speed when you get lined up side by side.
They're also closing in on the slower machine. I believe that's Stefan Martel, who we saw spin off of turn 2, hit the inside wall, but no caution came out to save him. And now he is going to fall -1 to the race leaders. Obviously a driver that is praying for a caution to come out to save him. Starting to get racy from the 6th position on back. That's Jessica Shelton jumping up there. Grant Wesley's taking a peek to try and toe that outside line as well.
Yep, Grant Wesley currently sitting in the 4th position. He's going to jump out of line, but Bob Dixon is going to see that as an opportunity for him to make up some ground on the racetrack. Now making the pass on the low side. Wesley now to the right rear quarter panel of Bob Dixon as they come into the tri-oval. That top line now starting to get way more cars than what that middle line has, and they're starting to make progress as Grant Wesley now working to the right rear quarter panel of the 24 of DeSpirito into turn 1.
You brought up this question, I believe, last week to Dante Ricky, and I think it was to a couple of other drivers that we interviewed since they were going to be advancing to the playoffs as well. So I'm going to actually echo it back to you, get your opinion. But we're seeing right now that these drivers, they are racing somewhat aggressive, but it's not quite the level of aggressiveness that we saw coming down the home stretch of the regular season. Is that because these drivers are willing to play nice, at least early on in this race, to just keep their cars in one piece, still be in the conversation when we get to around 15 to go?
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, but as we've also heard other drivers echo through interviews, there's a lot of really, really hard, aggressive driving out here, but these guys are so skilled at what they do. They do this week after week. It's not something that's new to them. It's not something that they just do, on a rare occasion. No, this is what these guys do, and it's what they excel at. So while you're giving a little bit of respect out there, you're still working on trying to make your way toward the front because it's a super speedway, and out front where that clean air is, man, that's a good feeling to have, having a car right on your back bumper and making speed. So I think you'll see guys playing nice, but at the same time, they're going to be looking out for themselves as well.
Got a couple of two-time winners side by side for the race lead. Bob Seminara and Grant Wesley. They were even down the back straightaway. Seminara edges ahead out of 4, but through this tri-oval, we'll have to see if that outside line gets the momentum. We're also going to have to see as well, speaking of that tri-oval, that has been the vocal point for us the last couple of weeks, because that's where a lot of the trouble and a lot of our big wrecks have taken place. We'll have to see if that holds true heading here into the playoffs.
Absolutely. And, I wouldn't be surprised. I hope we don't see it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do. I noticed coming out of the trial, especially that lap, these guys right on the side doors of the cars that are next to them, 2x2. Now, for anybody that can't see this right now, I don't think you quite understand. You've got the bottom lane with the white dotted line. Then you've got the middle lane that's quite a bit wider than the very top and the very bottom. The 2 lanes are sharing that middle line right now, and those cars are super tight together. There's very little margin for error, but right now, Seminara, he's got the clear advantage on the bottom side. That top side now, I just don't think that they're really comfortable. With as hard as they're having to race the guys right next to them in as close proximity as they are, I just don't think they're quite making the speed that they need to, and it looks like they're scrubbing it just a little bit in the corners.
And you talk about that little room for error with the tight racing we're seeing, not only for the lead, but all the way back there, 12th, 13th, 14th. We're about 7-8 rows deep of this side-by-side racing. If a wreck takes place up at the front, there's going to be very little room for these drivers behind to scatter to try and make it through.
No, it's going to be a mess. So hopefully they can keep it together clean and green. Right now, Jessica Shelton hard on the rear bumper of the 88 of Grant Wesley as we see side by side out of turn 4. I think Seminara and Wesley might have actually touched coming out of the corner as they're making their way into the tri-oval.
Yeah, I think they've actually made contact a couple of times. There's been very little space between those Chevrolet Camaros at the line that time. Man, if that had been the finish, that would have been close. I think Seminara just barely edged out Grant Wesley. So you can see both lanes are dead even by the time they get back to the start-finish line.
Yeah, and one little slip from any of these drivers could spell major disaster for themselves and the rest of the field. But these guys showing how good they are at what they do, they really do put on a show. It's a spectacle to behold. For anybody that's never, really watched this series, they race on super speedways every week, every Thursday night, with a lot of the same drivers week after week, have big 30-car fields, sometimes upwards of 30 cars. And, they're just really good at what they do. And these guys have a lot of respect for each other. They're all, for the most part, friends, when they're not racing each other as hard as what they are right now. And, it's just, like I said, it's a spectacle. This is one of the greatest shows that you can watch here.
Yeah, and we're looking at this field right now. The reason that neither lane has really been able to get an edge all the way back to the rear of the field, you've got the same number of cars on the top as you have on the bottom. Looks like now, we got some drivers that are ducking out of line there. I think McClure just jumped to the bottom. Donnie Garrett jumped up to the top. So now that outside line is breaking up. A reason for that, however, maybe McClure jumping to the bottom, is we're only about 3-4 laps away from when these drivers have to start thinking about their first playoff green flag pit stop.
Yep, green flag pit stops are coming. Bob Dixon's going to dive down onto pit road and make his way into pit road right now. But I think what broke up those 2 lines is there was some side-to-side warp that's happening with the number 24 of Joe DeSpirito. He was on the inside of the racetrack when that happened. I think it might have spooked guys a little bit as you see Grant Wesley now looking to the inside quarter panel of DeSpirito into turn 1 and 2. But that's something that Joe was fighting all practice long as well, was a little bit of a side-to-side warp. Now, while that's not typically such a big deal, when they're running as close as we've seen them running in these opening 18 laps, that can spell big trouble. So everybody kind of backing off, taking a little bit of breath as they get ready to work their way onto pit road here.
Yeah, the Men Cup 19 mod, maybe one of the more square mods out there. However, it's not without the opportunity of possible bumper grab. And with, as you said, with these drivers being as close to each other as they have been, there is a possibility that there could be a bumper grab leading to a wreck. Just saw Chuck McClure lead a contingency onto pit lane. So the cycle of pit stops has begun. It's about 8 drivers that came down with him, including Paglia, Nofsker, Garrett, and others.
Yep, it looks like these guys are working their way down pit road right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple 2-tire pit stops, but everybody going to be working on taking as much gas as they can right now. Your leaders, meanwhile, working their way down the middle of the backstretch right now, still being led by Seminara, Mobs, and DeSpirito. Florida Gang controlling this race as they have most race long. Everybody single file hugging the bottom of the racetrack. I wouldn't be surprised to see these guys peel off next. And it looks like Seminara, he will. Despirito got
Wow.
stuck outside that yellow line.
Richard Martin. He almost clicked up Dante Ricky. Bobby Farrell's going to get hit into the grass.
Somehow still no yellow flag. 4 cars parked at the entrance of pit road after, as we saw, Demar in the 43 nosed it into that inside wall, spun back up into traffic. The majority of your leaders, though, they're going to be able to maintain the momentum they had. They didn't look to be too affected by that right now. We do see these guys right side tires for Despirito, Bob, and Mobs as well. These guys going to top off their tanks, as it looks like the other pack of cars now just working their way off of turn number 4 towards the entrance of pit road. This is going to be a real run as they work their way down to turn 1 here. I wouldn't be surprised to see that cars working their way through the trioval right now clearly and easily get by these guys that are coming out of pit road right now.
Now, while I don't think either one of them sustained damage, this is going to put 2 drivers in a bit of a difficult situation to start this race off with after these pit stops are done. In terms of playoff contenders, Dante Ricky, he had to focus more on not getting hit by the spinning 43, and I believe Billy Elliser had to come to a dead stop to avoid running into Richard Martin. So those 2 drivers might find themselves in a bit of a sticky situation. I'm looking here, it looks like the 84 did actually get out with a number of the lead pack. So that 26 of Billy Elliser, we'll have to see where he cycles around after this is all said and done.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think for Billy Elliser, he's going to need to hope for a caution right now, because this lead pack right now, the front 4 clearly checked out from Joe Despirito and Bob Seminara behind them, but they're easily going to be able to draft back up to those cars. Wouldn't be surprised to see Seminara and the 24 of Despirito maybe make a pass or attempt to make a pass on the high side or the low side of these lead cars, as they're going to be carrying about 3 to 4 miles an hour difference on those cars, and they do, out of turn number 2, work their way to the high side.
Yeah, too much momentum to tuck in line, as looks like only those 3 will be jumping up there, though. Donnie Garrett moves down to the inside with Paglia. Wesley's going to go down there as well. Jessica Shelton stays down there. So while they had the momentum, they don't have the numbers right now. Despirito, Seminara, and Mobs hoping that a couple of drivers will jump up there with them. Maybe Metallic, maybe Dante Ricky. Looks like they're going up there in the trioval.
Yeah, but it looks like the number 9 of Chris Elliott, he's going to pick up the draft of that top line as well, as he works his way back up toward those guys. So I'm interested in seeing whether or not Despirito will hang it out on that higher line, or if him and Bob will try to slide themselves back down there. But right now, the top 5 is going to be McClure, Nofsker, Paglia, Donnie Garrett, Grant Wesley down the back straightaway. Single file, everybody ducking back down to get single file again here as they work their way into turn 3.
3 of those drivers playoff contenders. The rest of your playoff drivers are currently running as follows: Joe Despirito in 6th, Bob Seminara 7th, Jessica Shelton in 8th, Bernie Mobs 9th, and Josh Metallic in 10th. You got Dante Ricky in 11th. And then, as we mentioned, Billy Elliser, you got all the way down to 22nd. That's where the 26 car is currently running. We saw the 43 of Richard Martin. He had to come down pit road and serve a pass-through, since obviously with him spinning, he was not able to get it down to the 55 mile per hour pit road limit. And so unfortunate, kind of bad day goes worse for the driver of that Domino's Dodge.
Yeah, that's a really rough position to be in there. You lost a ton of position trying to get onto pit road, and then you've got to come in and serve another penalty. It just hurts the soul, man, especially as a driver, knowing how close that this whole pack was at the beginning of the race. And, you know, you're going to lose a lot of time, maybe even 2 laps at this point. So hopefully he can find some luck later on to get himself back on the lead pack. But right now, heading toward the trioval, about positions 1 through, I would say, what is that, 13 or 14, totally single file working their way to the line. Chuck McClure is still your leader, being pushed by the 088 of Tim Nofsker. Mark Paglia, Donnie Garrett, Grant Wesley still rounding out your top 5 through 1 and 2.
Got a car sitting on pit road right now. Wasn't able to make out who that was. It was behind the pit boxes. If we can find out who that is. Oh, that's Stefan Martel in the 57. And I'm assuming this is a regularly scheduled stop for him, as he's got that damaged machine, had fallen a lap down. Right now, he and Richard Martin, the only 2 cars that are currently running that are off the lead lap.
Right, and that would make sense for Martel too, because if you remember, he was involved in that green flag incident on the backstretch. So that really threw his strategy off from what the rest of the racers on the track are running right now. So not too surprised to see him in for tires and fuel as he'll work his broken machine back onto the racetrack here. Up front, not a whole lot going on. Everybody playing pretty nice, working their way single file through turns 1 and 2 onto the backstretch. We haven't seen much in the way of position shakeups, so I'm wondering if these guys trying to get to another green flag run, or if we'll see somebody try to duck out here pretty soon. But they've got a huge lead over the pack behind them. Not even close to the number of cars as what this lead draft has at the moment.
I think you're exactly right. I think these guys are running single file for two reasons. One, as you said, to try and get to that second round of pit stops. And number two, if they remain single file, they're going to continue to gap themselves to 13th place on back. They want to be able to settle it amongst themselves, I think. And if a caution doesn't come out, they're going to be able to do just that. You got Tim Knopfsker, two-time winner up here. You know, you talked with Jerm Lewis. If you're in a position to win, what do you do, even if you're battling with playoff contenders? I think Tim Knopfsker's in the same boat of what Jerm said. Hey, I'm here to win. Knopfsker would love to be the top of the board in terms of statistics in the win column with 3. And I think that it doesn't matter if it's a playoff contender around him or not. He's going to go for it.
No, and we've seen, in races past, he's got a really fast car. He's really good on these super speedways. So if he's got an opportunity to win it without, complicating anybody else's chances, I think that you're definitely going to see him try to make that move. Right now, those lead cars making a lot of speed, upwards of 200 miles an hour. We've got Grant Wesley, who is running in the 5th position into the tri-oval. So we know we've got a fast pair of cars leading the pack. I wonder if maybe that might have also to do something to do with the fact that we don't see anybody else really trying to make moves, just because those leaders are making so much speed on the racetrack right now.
Could very well. We got another couple of cars up here for the race leaders to deal with. Stefan Martel has now caught the 38 of Rodney Sullins. Sullen's going to go a lap down. Martel going to go another lap down. He is currently at -3 with that pass. Chuck McClure. I mean, he was consistent all season long, finished out the regular season 3rd in points, but he's still looking for a trip to victory lane. How cool would it be for him if he were able to lock himself in the next round of the playoffs with his first win of the season?
Oh, I think he would be absolutely ecstatic. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he might have missed the chase last season due to a couple issues during the season. So to get himself back in here, to make himself, to really show these guys, hey, I haven't won a race yet this year, but you guys know that I am capable of winning a race this year. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. So to be able to lock himself in right now, sitting only 6 points out of the point lead coming into tonight's race with the point reset, leading the field, that's a pretty good feeling as they work their way off to turn 3.
Yep, piggybacking off what you were just saying, 3 drivers here tonight are in the playoffs that were not in the playoffs last season. McClure in the 17, Jessica Shelton in the 94, Billy Elliser in the 26. Another thing, if we're kind of looking at some trends during the course of this season, we ended up having Grant Wesley not win the first race, but he won the second race. He didn't win the third race, but he won the 4th race. So he was on a streak of winning the even-numbered races. We had Dante Ricky bookend the regular season, winning the season opener and the regular season finale. If we're following another trend here, how about the fact that the very first race of the season to start off the regular season went caution-free? Do you think maybe we'll have the first race of the playoffs go caution-free?
I mean, it's entirely feasible that it's possible, as we now see the 24 of Despirito working his way to the inside of the 88 of Grant Wesley. Despirito with Seminary and Mobs, they're going to try to make this bottom line work again, as it looks like everybody else is going with that low line. Right now, the top line just being the 17 McClure, the 88 of Knopfsker, as we see Paglia now tucked down to the inside of the track. A little bit of a block thrown there, might have thrown Donnie Garrett off. I saw him sideways in the tri-oval.
Yeah, all of a sudden the 77 and the 88 find themselves in the wrong lane, going to the back of this 13-car field. Actually, make that 12-car field, this lead pack. They'll drop back in line and try and see if they can work their way back up to the front. Looks like right now, Despirito kind of picking through the field slowly but surely. He knows those 7, 12, and the 90 are going to go with him, so he's just utilizing whatever momentum he can to kind of calculate his moves. And look at the run they get there through 3 and 4. They may be up at the front by the time we get back to the start-finish line.
Yeah, what you see is Despirito just being real smart about when he times those moves and when he decides to make them. He's now on the outside of the 17 of McClure into the tri-oval. Now the top line looks to have a couple more cars than what the bottom line did. So McClure and Novsk are going to try to maintain their position without losing too much on the low side. But right now, 6 cars lined up on the middle lane of the racetrack as they work their way through turns 1 and 2.
Go to Spirito to the point, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this was a trend from last year as well, where Joe DeSpirito or not last year, but the first race of the season, where Joe DeSpirito started on the pole, but he didn't lead the first lap. Well, he didn't lead the first lap here tonight. That right there was his first lap led of the race.
Well, and we've seen Joe DeSpirito lead a lot of laps so far this season, but not be able to get that number 24 to victory lane. A conversation that we had with him earlier in the season, Seth, if you recall, is he came in tonight and he got his 8th pole position, saying, I would trade all of these pole positions if I could get a win here in this series. And we know that he's capable of doing that, as he did last season with the chase format.
Absolutely. Right now, if you look at this shot, in that lead group are 9 of your playoff contenders. The one driver that still needs a caution to be able to keep his playoff hopes alive, he is running up here half a lap down. Billy Elliser working with Bobby Farrell, Robbie Nisus, the lap machine of Richard Martin, and Jeff Crivello, all trying to stay ahead of that lead group, remain on the lead lap, and of course, hope for a yellow flag to come out. So that way Elliser can get back up here, challenge these drivers, because like we said, you don't really want to start out the first race of the first round of the playoffs in a deficit, in a hole, not only to the points lead, but to that cutoff 7th position in the standings.
Yeah, no, that's not something that you want to do. Just like, the 24 didn't want to lose a 48-point cushion, but that's just the way that this plays out and the way that this format is laid out for these drivers, so they know. We completed the first part of the season. That part of the season is over. Now we have to completely reset and really go for it for these last 5 races. And no surprise, Joe DeSpirito trying to get it done. 4 cars now the advantage on the top side of the racetrack over the inside line. Chuck McClure is still leading that pack with Nofsker and Paglia in tow. Dante Ricky now working his way up to the 7th spot as he's the 5th car on the outside line. That's a little bit of a hang-up that he had entering pit road. Doesn't seem to have hold him up too bad at this point. And that top line now, they're starting to check out again from that bottom line.
At a near moment over there in turn 4, as Manny D and Glenn Harris were put a lap down. Glenn's car went up and actually was in the outside wall all the way through the final corner. Almost came down to Manny D, but we remain green. We are halfway home, but we have not been without incident. We had a problem off of turn 2 involving Bobby Farrell and Stefan Martel. Martel getting the most damage out of that one. No caution came out for that. During our first round of green flag pit stops, Richard Martin had a moment coming onto pit lane, but no yellow flag coming out for that one. So the field is awfully spread out. We've got 12 cars up in this lead group that are on the lead lap. And with all that being said, these guys are about 6-7 laps away from making that second round of green flag pit stops.
Yeah, so I don't think we'll see anything too crazy here in the way of moves being made on the racetrack. These guys know they're only about, like you said, 6 or 7 laps away from green flag stops. No sense in complicating anything or putting anybody at risk at this point, as we see now. Looks like Wiley's stuck out on that outside, or no, my mistake, Josh Metallic. Those Oscar Mayer cars, they really screw me up sometimes. But again, everybody's single file all the way out onto the backstretch. They have picked up some lap cars at this point, so that's going to speed their pace up just a little bit. Everybody's still single file in the middle of the racetrack working toward turn number 3.
Picked up the 38 of Rodney Sullins, so now 13 cars up in this lead group. It's about 12 and a half seconds back before you get to a second group. That's being led by Wiley Coate, Dave Melson, Bob Dixon, and others, as the 9 of Chris Elliott coming to pit road. This seems a little bit early to be making that second pit stop.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that he decided to come without help. We saw Bob Dixon was the first Dorito car earlier to come in and make a pit stop with no help, and it didn't work out too well for him. So kind of surprised to see Elliott doing the same thing here. I don't know if maybe he's banking on a caution happening with a large group of cars having to come down and take green flag stops. We saw, chaos broke out earlier, so I wonder if he's kind of thinking, that might happen again, and I don't want to put myself at risk if that does happen again. So, maybe trying to make a smart play here to pit before everybody else does as they work their way out to turn number 4.
Yeah, right now, I think he would be about 8 laps short of making it to the finish, having to still make one more pit stop before the checkered flag waves. The rest of these drivers, we're expecting to see them on pit road somewhere in the next 5 to 6 laps. We know that some of these guys came down a lap earlier than others. I believe the Florida boys up here, they all came down on the second lap of the green flag pit stop. So we'll be looking about mid-pack of this lead group for some of our first drivers to duck onto pit road.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of those guys that, were up front most of the time, i.e. Joe DeSpirito, maybe even the 17 of Chuck McClure, having used a little bit more gas as they worked their way and broke that draft with the cars behind them, probably at a lap, maybe to disadvantage from the rest of the field. But again, it looks like we will have cars peeling off pit road, the same as the first cars before. We've got the 17 McClure 088 of Nofsker, as well as a couple others in tow from them.
Boy, Mark Paglia really had to work the brakes there to avoid running over first Tim Nofsker and then Chuck McClure, but those four will get on pit road safely. Again, this seems a little bit early, but regardless of if they pit now or if they stretch it as far as they can possibly go here on this run, they're still going to have to come to pit road at least one more time if we complete this race entirely under the green flag.
And it does seem a little bit early, but we also have to take into account that that was the lead group of cars that came in first last time. They spent a lot of time out front. So again, like we talked about with that 1 or 2 lap deficit from the rest of the field, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 24 and 712 as they will peel off the racing surface at this time. Man, Joe DeSpirito carrying a lot of speed to the entrance of pit road. If he doesn't get busted speeding, I clocked him at about 70 miles per hour. I will be amazed. But man, what a hot pit there entry. Nobody in trouble, though. Everybody makes it in clean and green.
Yeah, Bob Seminara was down on the inside coming to pit road. He nearly looped it around, but he kept it going. Is now, we got a spinner back here on the entrance of pit road. That's the 99 of Doug Woolley. Doesn't look like anybody hit him, though. He's going to be able to get it rolling as other drivers that were in the third group there, Farrell, Ellison, as well as Richard Martin and Robbie Nisus, they're on pit lane. And I believe that's all the lead lap cars. I don't think anybody else stayed out an extra lap. So, again, we jump up. Oh, we got a caution. Caution is out. And I wonder if it might have been for the 99 spinning coming onto pit road. So I think, according to this, I think Crivello actually might have stayed out. So I think he is going to be the race leader.
Yeah, and like I started to say there, I'm not sure if that was the no 99 or not. Like I said, he did have his car straight on pit road. I did look at that. There were no caution lights on at the time, so not entirely sure here.
I'm going to go back and see if we can pinpoint the exact moment that the caution lights come out on the pace car to try and figure out just what exactly brought this yellow flag out, because we had a spin take place with Richard Martin earlier at pit road entry, and that didn't bring out a caution. So the question here is, was the incident with Doug Woolley what brought the yellow flag out, or was there something else in some other portion of the track?
I didn't see anybody out of shape or off the racing surface. Also didn't see anybody smoking as if they'd had an engine let go. So not entirely sure, but this definitely going to shake things up in a very big way here, as we had leaders that were still on and coming off of pit road also need to look to see whether or not the 24 was posted for speeding onto pit road. If that's the case, he can't clear that penalty under yellow. He's going to have to wait for the race to go back green again. So we'll have to see what officials say on that.
Okay, I've just cycled through the field at the exact moment the yellow flag came out, and I did not see anybody sideways, spinning, anything like that. So I'm not really sure what this yellow flag came out for, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we maybe had a bit of a debris caution. The 56 Crivello will peel off pit road. Oh, Chuck McClure in trouble at the entrance of pit road.
17 gonna go around. I don't think he hit anything, and I'm pretty sure I now know the reason that the caution came out here. We have been told that if a driver comes down pit lane, pulls into their pit stall, and retires out of the race while the crew is doing service on their race car, the race officials in NR will read it as if a debris caution needs to be thrown. We mentioned the 99 of Doug Woolley spinning onto pit lane. He pulled into his stall and took it to the garage area. His car was being serviced at the time. So it is one of those debris glitch cautions that brings out the first yellow of the night.
All right, and as we saw, the 17, like I mentioned, spun onto pit road, was pretty heavy contact as he sat sideways at pit entrance from the 088 of Tim Nofsker. It's going to be just behind the left front wheel of the 17 car. So interested in seeing here how bad that damage is. Hopefully it doesn't affect anything too much, but two of the really fast cars in trouble under yellow flag working their way on a pit road here at Talladega.
We'll take a look and see what you're talking about here with Chuck McClure in the 17 car. It's kind of hard to tell if, I mean, McClure made an awfully late call to come to pit road. Nofsker was already committed, and I'm not sure that 17 might not have possibly clipped the grass just a little bit too, which caused him to spin around in front of Nofsker.
Right, and if that's the case too, he will also probably likely be looking at a black flag for an unsafe pit entry. So insult to injury. Still haven't heard any word on the 24 of Despirito or if he managed to get it in clean. So as we get back to green, a couple cars will have to keep an eye on the 24 and the 17 and see whether or not they will have to come down to serve penalties for pit road entry errors.
And for Chuck McClure, I think with missing the commitment line, I think that's a 30-second penalty as well. That's dropped him all the way back to restarting in the 19th position. 17 car has been up in the top 5 all night long, has led 10 of the laps here this evening, but now has to try and work his way back through the field. And the driver right now breathing a huge sigh of relief for that caution coming out. That's Billy Elliser, because now he is back up here in the lead pack and still has his chances of moving on to the next round of the playoffs. The glimmer of hope is back for that 26 machine.
Yep, that puts him and a whole lot of other guys. Don't forget about them back into contention for this victory as well. 17 came back in. He's going to top off on fuel one last time. We officially have 42 laps of competition left in the books, so that will leave 25 laps remaining as they work their way onto the back straightaway. Seth, we're going to rack them back up, get everybody back in a big pack again. I wouldn't be surprised if we get the old cautions breeding caution adage comes to life here as they work their way through the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at this point in time, if the lights go out on the pace car this next time around, we'll be going back green with 23 laps to go. And we know about the furthest these drivers can go on fuel is about 20, maybe 21 laps. So they're still going to be 2 to 3 laps short on fuel. If we have a caution come out within the next 5 to 7 laps, everybody should be good to make it to the checkered flag. Drivers that will not be making the checkered flag, however, had 30 drivers start this race, 26 still running. As Chris Emery, we already documented his engine failure early on in this race. Stefan Martel, who had an early issue, he is out of the race. Doug Woolley has retired, and John Godfrey has actually taken his machine back to the garage area as well. So 27th through 30th is where those 4 drivers will finish here tonight.
Still a lot of points left out there on the line, Seth, with only 4 cars being out. Now, remember, if you are the leader, if you're somebody like a Bob Seminara or Joe Despirito right now, who's been running at the front of the pack all day long, and you have something happen to you that relegates you back to that 25th position, that's a 25-point drop. Remember, coming into tonight's race, Billy Ellisor only 30 points off that point lead. So 25 points could still play a big difference as they leave tonight's round number 1 here at Talladega.
Absolutely. Right now, the driver that is in that 7th position that everybody is gunning for as far as the next round of the playoffs is concerned is the 39 of Josh Metallic. He's going to be rolling off 8th here on this restart. As you see our 2 lucky dog drivers going around, Rodney Sullins and Glenn Harris. That will have us with a total of 23 drivers on the lead lap when we go back green.
You know, it's funny. I hear you mention Josh Metallic. Josh, another one of those drivers in this series that you're more surprised than you aren't hearing coming into the chase that he has no victories yet on the season. Josh, another really good, strong, stout contender on these super speedway races. I would have to imagine restarting in 8th place, a pretty good feeling right now. I feel like, with 24 laps here to go, 23 at the time of the green flag, that gives you a little bit of a cushion. You can kind of get comfortable again. And I think actually, as we said that, he may have actually come down and topped off the gas tank again, as I am seeing him lined up at the rear of the field.
I think you are correct. Yes, the 39 did come down pit lane, as did, I believe, Wiley Coate, Donnie Garrett, and I believe the 43 of Richard Martin all came down pit lane there when the lights went out for one to go.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of fuel strategy. Like you mentioned, Seth, you can probably only make about 20 to 21 laps under green flag with a full tank of gas. So these guys trying to see if they can't get themselves to the end of the race here. Right now, it looks like the
Oh,
60
whoa,
Perry
whoa.
Bond,
Gracious.
he has left the racing service entirely.
No, he's
Oh,
back.
he's
He
back.
is there. Oh, goodness.
But that car in a really bad shape. Not sure if it's under power or if he's just letting cars by him. But he pulled a Jimmy Horton in turn 3 and 4 and just exited the racing surface. And I'm also seeing the 24 of Despirito, who is the leader coming to the line here. I've seen him blink out a couple times too. So if I was the competitors behind him, I'd be a little bit concerned with that as well.
Yeah, Billy Elliser, you see, leaving a gap there for where Perry Bond should be. Not sure if he should move up or not. So that outside line may not get the best of starts here, since there is a gap from the third car on that outside line back to Elliser.
And 24 of Despirito with a really good, strong restart there. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't moved up in front of the 712 of Bob Seminara at this point. But right now, only 3 cars on that outside line and about another car length or 2 back to what looks to be the 26 of Billy Ellis, who's right back up in this race again. But that bottom line, or that bottom middle line, we should say, the clear advantage as they work their way down the backstretch into turn 3.
7th on that outside line is Chuck McClure. We'll be following his progress back up to the front of the field. And we saw, as you mentioned, Josh Metallic, he came down pit road. I even noticed some of our leaders up here at the front, the 24 of Despirito, the 84 of Dante Ricky, they were trying to save some fuel. But I'm not even sure, with coming to pit road or saving fuel, if any of these drivers would be able to make it to the checkered flag. I still think they'd be about 2 to 3 laps short.
Well, if running at the back of the pack with as fast as this field is going, you might be able to clutch your way into the corners. You're going to lose quite a bit of time doing it, but you might be able to save a lap. But to save 2 or 3 laps, that's a tall order, because you're all in on the throttle every lap around this racetrack, no matter who it is that you're racing. So it's hard to save gas, especially with 22 laps remaining here. I think everybody is more than likely, barring a caution, going to have to come in and top off for fuel one more time.
Let's also remember as well that one race that Grant Wesley was able to win, where everyone was coasting, literally crawling around this racetrack under the final caution period of the event. There is, I guess, the possibility, if you're 2 to 3 laps short, let's say a caution comes out around that point of no return that we talk about, the completion of lap 62. Is it possible to be able to clutch and save those 2 or 3 laps under those 3 laps you would have under pacing coming to the checkered flag? I think maybe it's possible, just based off that race that we had earlier on this season.
Well, I think if you're the 88 of Grant Wesley, you feel like your chances of that are pretty good. But if you're any other competitor in the field that wasn't able to pull off that feat, because we did hear guys say, in second and third position, they ran out of gas right at the line. So it'll all depend on whether they stay green or whether they have another caution flag come out. But at this point in the race, single file, about 14 cars back, led by Joe Despirito in that middle lane. The last car single file is going to be the 13 of Dave Melson. They're 2 by 2 behind them, but with the majority of the field being single file right now, I don't see any of those guys that are running double file now 3 wide around the 13 of Melson making any really major progress toward the front. But right now, I'm really worried about the 24 of Despirito. He's got a lot of side-to-side warp going on, and he's blinking in and out. That is not a good place to be in, especially when you're leading the entire pack behind you.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Dante Ricky been right up on his back bumper. He's there again going into turn 3. So with that 24 disappearing and reappearing, that's going to make things a little bit edgy as far as whether or not the 24 might
Oh, we got
reappear.
trouble out of 4. Glenn Harris sideways. I see we got another car sideways back there as well. Yellow flag is out. Car still wrecking into the tri-oval.
That's Manny D and Robbie Nisus. Second caution of the night. First one for a crash here at Talladega.
It looked like the Glenn Harris machine. I'm not sure if he might have come down into a car on the inside line or if somebody may have come up into his left rear fender, but got turned sideways. And there was another white car that got turned sideways right behind him as well. It didn't look like it was going to be too much of an incident, but then coming into the entrance of the tri-oval, there were a couple other cars that spun across the track being collected as well. So lap number 48, we are under yellow, still being led by the 24 of Despirito. Seth, that fuel strategy thing that we were talking about, we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Nope, that's out the window now. All these drivers will be able to make it to the checkered flag on fuel. And just looking back there at the replay, looked kind of like a reactionary wreck. As I believe Glenn Harris thought Manny D was coming down. He tried to give him room. He had Robbie Nisus to his inside. That's what led to the contact. And then Robbie Nisus and Manny D making a little bit more contact after Manny slid up into Nisus' left side door. So 4 drivers involved in this one, bringing out our second caution of the evening. Glenn Harris in that 08 had actually just gotten back on the lead lap. And with this caution, Richard Martin and Cy Jones will be the recipient of the free pass.
Man, I'll tell you what, Donnie Garrett just narrowly made it through the entirety of that crash. He had cars spinning in front of him, above him, below him, and just barely made it through there. He's got to be breathing a sigh of relief, as I believe he was another one of those cars that came in and topped off on fuel before that race went back to green there. But his car's still in good working order right now.
These drivers, they're going to be getting back green with less than 20 laps to go. Despirito and others on pit lane. Looking to see if maybe... Nope, I wondered if the 39 of Josh Metallic might roll the dice and stay out for track position, since he was going to be about maybe 2 laps better on fuel than the other drivers that had not come down and topped off the fuel tank. But nope, he comes down pit road. Other drivers that also came down on that 1 lap to green, like Wiley Coate and Donnie Garrett, they've come down pit road as well. So everybody making absolutely sure that they are going to be good to make it the rest of the way.
Yep, some not so major shakeups in the field. As we see, it looks like the 088 of Nosker, he opted not to pit, and he will now be your leader at this point in time. A couple lap cars behind him. Waiting to see if he ducks onto pit road this time by the top off, or if he's going to stay there. Because if he does stay there without coming down, I believe there are some lap cars that are behind him that will have to serve a drive-through just to get out of the way of the leaders. Had Nofsker not been there, they would have been eligible for wave arounds. So we'll have to see what happens as the pace car works its way out of turn 4 right now.
Yeah, Richard Martin and Cy Jones there. They are going to be the free pass machines. We'll see if Nofsker does come to pit road. We do have another driver that has retired out of the race. We saw that huge warp issue that Perry Bond had over in 3 and 4. He's now taken his number 60 down pit lane, made the left-hand turn to the garage area, and he will finish 26th officially here tonight.
Yeah, rough finish there for Perry. You hate to see it. He'd been really working toward trying to gain some momentum and get some more good finishes in the books. And I believe the 84 of Dante Ricky may be on pit road again, topping off the fuel tank.
I've actually just heard from race control on that. Apparently there was some contact on pit lane between Joe Despirito and Dante Ricky. So Dante Ricky's coming down pit road, self-EOLing himself for that contact on pit lane.
Makes me wonder if any of those drivers might have gotten some damage in that, because as we see, the 24 of Despirito still running in second position. I wouldn't think, without any sort of damage done to either one of those cars, that he would have had to have served a penalty. So not entirely sure if we can take a look back and see what happened there, because I didn't even see that happen, Seth.
Yeah, I didn't either. Looks like it might have been just at the entrance of pit road here. Maybe a bump that took place. I'm not really certain. Coming down here to the commitment line. Let's see if the 84 maybe just lightly runs into the back of the 24. It's hard to tell from that angle if there was any contact. 24 was still blinking in front of the 84, even coming down pit road. And I didn't see any contact between the two of them coming off of pit lane either.
Oh, there was definitely contact coming on. As you see, if you take a look at it another time, the 24 car of Joe DeSpirito abruptly loaded up from 70 miles an hour to 55. And right when he did that, Dante Ricky was not anticipating that much of a checkup all at once. Did get into the rear end of the 24 pretty hard. But again, can't speak on whether or not there was any damage done to that. If there was any damage done to the 24, I can't imagine that's going to play too much of an effect on his race car as fast as we've seen it, especially being on the rear end of the car.
Dante going to have to work his way from the back up to the front. Was running at the time in the second position, the highest he has run all night. And I'm hearing that Tim Nofsker machine, since he did not come to pit road, he's hoping for a caution, a couple more cautions to come out to be able to make it on fuel. Right now, the official word, he's about a lap and a half short of making it to the checkered flag. Everybody else, though, good to go.
Yeah, I think if we have another caution here, which is entirely plausible at this point, he's going to be just fine. If this race goes to the end under green flag conditions, he's going to find himself in a bad position. But again, the 088, as we've talked before, did not quite make the cut for the chase this week as we work toward the end of the season in these last 5 weeks. So he's out there trying to get himself a win, gambling on track position and maybe another yellow flag at this point. They're side by side working their way through turns 1 and 2. We will have 15 laps remaining at the line. I think we're about to be in for a really exciting finish once again this week, Seth.
Absolutely. We've got 8 of our 10 playoff contenders up inside of the top 10. The drivers looking to play spoiler. Nofsker, the race leader, and Jeff Crivello on the outside of row 2. Crivello looked like he was a contender last week to maybe try and take a checkered flag, spend quite a portion of that race up in the front. You got DeSpirito, who roll off second, Seminara in third, Shelton in fifth, Grant Wesley sixth, Bernie Mobb seventh, Metallic in eighth, Elliser's now up in the top 10 in ninth, Chuck McClure completing the top 10. Mark Paglia right now back in 13th. That's the furthest back he's run all day. And Dante Ricky currently back in 21st position. Happy to see if he can work his way back up to the front in 15 laps time.
So 8 of your top 10 right now in playoff contention. Tim Nofsker, Jeff Crivello in the 56 looking to spoil the reign of the playoff drivers here tonight. Pace car working its way out of turn 4 side by side. 15 laps to go when we go back to green. I think we're in for a little bit of excitement here. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot more single file racing as we have to this point of the night. Quite a bit more single file than I think we've seen most of the season. Now that we've got all that green flag racing out of the way, I wouldn't be surprised to see some guys, especially at the back of the pack, namely in the number 84, having to serve that penalty, work their way aggressively toward the front of the pack as they work their way to the green flag here at the line at Talladega.
Our playoff drivers have had a rather uneventful night in terms of the treachery of Talladega, but now with 15 laps to go, it's go time. Push is going to come to shove, and this may be the portion of the race that's going to set us up for our playoff scenarios for the next round, the top 7 heading into next week.
Man, and the 088 of Nofsker slid right across the front bumper of the 24 of DeSpirito to take the lead on that middle line. Again, we've seen that middle line be real fast, but right now the Florida gang having to race each other as the 712 of Bob Seminara will work down below the 24 of DeSpirito, who is behind the 088 of Nofsker. Right now, more cars on the outside line than there are on the inside line, but that's not slowing down Seminara as they work toward their way into the trial.
Nofsker needs to look up at the flag stand and see a yellow flag in the hand of the race official for 2 reasons. 1, he's already short on fuel. 2, he's out in front, so he's using up even more fuel. No chance to save right now for that machine.
No, there's nothing that Tim can do, and he needs to just keep his car exactly where it is. Again, if he does have to take a pit stop for fuel here with 2 or 3 laps remaining, it's not going to take him out of contention. It'll take him out of contention for a win, but if you're Tim Knopfsker in the 088, I think you either win or it doesn't really matter where you finish. If you're not a winner, you're out there just trying to help your friends. Grant Wesley with a power move to the inside out of the back straightaway. Quite a bit of momentum here carried out of turn number 4. He's trying to make moves on the bottom side of the 56 of Jeff Crivello.
I was wondering just how many cars it was going to take on that outside line to clear the 712 before someone jumped down there. I thought maybe Joe DeSpirito may be the driver to move down, but Wesley, as you mentioned, is the one that's going to jump to that inside and try to lead them to the front. We've seen this the last couple of weeks as well, where Grant Wesley really wants to be that lead car on the inside line. Sometimes he's been able to make it work, other times he's not been able to. Right now, that 88 making forward progress. He's gotten himself up alongside Joe DeSpirito for second place.
Yeah, he's trying real hard. He's going to fall back just a little bit to the inside of Crivello at this point, but working their way into turn number 3, Knopfsker, DeSpirito, Crivello, Metallic on the high side. Grant Wesley now on the 88 on the low side below Crivello, being pressed by the 712 of Seminara, the 94 of Jessica behind him. Again, we see a car that was in trouble a little bit earlier after a pit road incident. Chuck McClure has worked his way to the 5th car in the middle line at this time. He's making quite a bit of speed up there, looking to get his way back up front again.
3 wide mid-pack for a brief moment. For the most part here at the front, we have remained side-by-side double wide. But let's not forget last week's race that set up our 10 playoff drivers. We were 3 wide and 4 wide on a couple of occasions on those final 2 laps. You just kind of get a feeling the storm is slowly brewing, and sooner or later that third line is going to come into play as we draw closer to the end of this race. We may be in for a finish much like last week's.
We could very well be in for a finish much like last week. But keep in mind, if we go green to the end of this race, the leader right now, who is being pushed by the 24 of DeSpirito and Tim Knopfsker, is going to have to pit for fuel. We know the same is true for the 56 of Jeff Crivello. So the car's running 1st and 3rd, leading the field right now without a yellow flag. That's going to throw them into a bit of a little bit of a jam, because that's going to roll up the rest of the field as those guys work their way down to the inside of the track to get prepared for pit stops. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well as the race progresses.
We talked about Knopfsker and Crivello possibly playing spoiler and taking an automatic ticket into the round of 7 away from one of the playoff drivers. A couple of drivers that have popped up into the top 10 for the first time tonight. The 13 of Dave Melson, the 6 of Wiley Coates. So keep an eye on them as well as they race around these playoff drivers.
Yeah, and I don't think that's anything that we're really surprised in seeing, as we knew once we got those yellow flags, that was going to group the field back up. Now, those cars, they weren't off the pace. There was nothing wrong with them. It's just the way that their strategies played out with the green flag pit stops. They got out of sync with the lead draft. The leaders got away from them, but now they're right back in the game again. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Dave Melson, as you just mentioned, to work his way up toward the front and be a contender here at the end of the night.
Right now, in terms of the bracket challenge, Grant Wesley with the advantage over Bob Dixon, Chuck McClure with the advantage over Mark Paglia, but a lot can still change here as we are at 9.5 laps to go down this back straightaway, heading for 9 to go at the start-finish line. Top 5 might be clear on that outside line by the time we get out of the final corner.
Yeah, and with 9 laps to go here at the line, I think somebody's got to figure out something to do with these lead cars. We know how fast that 088 car is out front. We know how fast that 24 car is up front. Nobody has really been able to give those cars a run for their money tonight. They've been super fast. They've been clearly the class of the field. So Grant Wesley doing his very best as he's, 6 cars back on the inside line. Doesn't have a whole lot of help in front of him. He's got the 712 of Seminara behind him, but they're not making any progress toward the front.
Well, we heard from race control about the situation for Tim Knopfsker being about a lap and a half short as McClure and Garrett jump to the inside. The question is the rest of the field aware of the situation for that 088? Is he going to bring it to pit road when he starts running out of fuel, or will he run out of fuel while trying to still continue to battle? He almost went around off the nose of Joe DeSpirito, who made a hole to the inside going into 3.
Man, a couple really aggressive moves there that played out really well. Chuck McClure, when Knopfsker made that move, to try to get, or when DeSpirito tried to make that move to get by Knopfsker, Tim Knopfsker held his line. He did exactly what he had to do to try to avoid losing any momentum. Meanwhile, the 17 of McClure shot up the racetrack, glued himself to the rear bumper of the OE88, and that's a dangerous pairing. We saw those two guys hooked up earlier tonight, going really fast, making a lot of speed, but Despirito and Garrett on the inside line, they're still fighting back down into turn number 3.
Any caution at this point would be raced back to the start-finish line. For that reason, we see the third lane start to form. Jessica Shelton, Wiley Coate, Rodney Sullins up there as well. They've gotten themselves up 3 wide for the 6th position and continuing to move forward.
Jessica Shelton in that number 94 leads that third lane up top. They're making a lot of speed. They're going to pull their way up alongside the 088 of Tim Novsker, marking their way into turn number 1. But I think that's not the last thing that they're going to do either. They've got a lot of speed and they've got a lot of momentum. Despirito now got a clear car length to the outside of him as he gets pushed by the 77 of Garrett. The middle line falling off. They've only got 4 cars in that middle line being led by Novsker at this point. That low line is fast, and that's the place to be. Third line up, they look to have...
gracious. Novsker out of shape there after contacting himself and Grant Wesley. I thought we were going to have a wreck in 3.
Amazing save there by Novsker. That could have spelled big trouble for many of these drivers and many of these playoff contenders. Grant Wesley now, he's on the back bumper of the 77 of Garrett into the tri-oval.
We almost had a wreck as well just before that contact between Wesley and Novsker. Is I think Wiley Coate and Rodney Sullins may have had a little bit of bumper grab up in that third lane. They keep it together, though. A couple of near misses in the last 2 laps. Oh, there's Crivello into Shelton. They save it.
Another great save. Shelton brushes the outside wall. Not sure if she got any damage
now
out of
they're
that.
wrecking even more, but they still remain straight. Sullins and Shelton made some more contact on the backstretch.
Amazing saves all around. We knew 4 wide probably wouldn't work out of that corner. It didn't, but everybody crashed, but didn't crash. Great saves. Side by side back up front. Garrett to the outside of the 24, Joe Despirito. They are door to door working their way off of turn number 4.
We're back to where we were around the middle portion of the first green flag run, where drivers were all sharing that middle line. And we know now that the gap that looked like it was minuscule before, it's going to be non-existent now. These drivers are more than likely going to be leaning on each other through these corners as we close in on 3 laps to go.
5 laps to go. That time by side by side by side by side, 4 rows deep. These guys are not done. Billy Ellisor, who we mentioned earlier, got into a little bit of trouble, fell a lap down. He is now running in number 8th position, the 4th car on that inside line. So that perseverance has really paid off well for...
Oh, Grant Wesley! Off the nose of Novsker. That's going to be a caution. Robbie Nice is collected up. Novsker and the 088 were racing back maybe to the checkered flag here. Donnie Garrett trying to hold off Despirito, and Despirito with the help from Bob Seminara and Bernie Mobbs will lead them back to the start-finish line. I think this race is over. I don't know if we'd get a 1-lap shootout or not because we didn't get back to the completion of 62 prior to that yellow flag coming out.
Can confirm with the number 710 of Manny D being 1 lap down. That is going to be your race right there. There will be no opportunity for a green flag, checkered flag finish. Joe Despirito, after working all season long, 8 poles, 10 races later, finally going to get win number 1 in chase race number 1 here at Talladega Superspeedway.
The champ is finally back in victory lane. Joe Despirito came into tonight's race not necessarily in a must-win situation, just based off the bonus points he got for winning the regular season championship, but he can now head into next week breathing a sigh of relief, knowing he will be moving on to the round of 7 in an attempt to defend his championship crown.
And that is a great way to start off your playoff hopes right there. Joe Despirito, we knew that he was fast all season long. He knew that he was fast all season long. The only one of the Florida gang that wasn't able to secure a victory throughout the regular season. That's going to be a really good feeling heading into next week. You know, that takes a little bit of the heat off you. You can run a little bit looser, you know, and probably take a couple more chances to try to gain as many more points as you can heading toward the second round of the playoffs.
Now, from the elation of Joe Despirito to the heartache of Grant Wesley, this is what happened going into turn 3. Looked like the 88 was already out of shape heading down towards the inside. He turns it back up, trying to correct it. Bumper grabs off Tim Nofsker, who then gets a shot from the oncoming 54 of Robbie Nisus. And as things stand right now, Wesley was able to leave the scene of the accident, but currently looks like he will be finishing this race somewhere around the 22nd position.
Yeah, that was just a bit of bumper grab heading down off into the corners. Now, I can't really say as though Novsker did anything wrong in that scenario. He was really just trying to help the 88 of Grant Wesley get up toward the front. We saw they were very fast. They had the speed. They could have made the run, but unfortunately just a little too close in that contact, putting Grant Wesley now in a really rough spot as they exit the first week of the chase. Currently scored 22nd position. Have to see if that changes all. Not likely to see any cars come into pit road between now and the finish of the race, but rough start to the week. That has been the worst luck of any of the playoff drivers that we've seen so far. We thought maybe Billy Ellis at the beginning of the race, he was going to have a little bit of a trouble, but he got himself right back up into contention. I believe he's going to end up with a top 10 out of this. The same for the 17 of Chuck McClure, who got into an accident coming onto pit road. Found his way back up to the front. So if you're the 88 of Grant Wesley, you know that you can come out here and you know you can win races. So I think he's already going to have to be thinking ahead for that next week.
Zach, I'm not sure this race is over. I'm not sure the drivers are sure this race is over. Manny D is up here as if he's going to get his lap back. I also saw the 94 of Jessica Shelton come down pit lane, giving up a couple of positions to get the damage she sustained repaired. So there might be the possibility we could go back green with a one-lap shootout. It all depends on the pace car right here, whether the lights stay on or whether they go off.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens across the line here, but I am fairly certain that is going to be the race. Typically, when you have a car that is one lap down, that's going to be a minimum of 4 laps. And yes, the yellow lights are still on, which means this race is going to be all done. But as I was saying before, typically, and this is something that most of these guys know out here on the speedway, when you do have at least one car a lap down, that keeps the pit road open for one additional lap. When everybody's on the lead lap, it's only 3 laps of yellow. So coming to the line with 4 to go, the caution, it was a good race to the line. Wasn't quite the race to the line I think we had hoped for, but still a good show tonight, and Joe DeSpirito's got to be feeling pretty good about himself as he comes around a couple more times here under yellow.
Absolutely. I mean, it must have been so difficult for him. All 10 races of the regular season, so close, never finished outside of the top 5, all those 10 races, but just couldn't close the deal with a trip to victory lane. He now heads here into the playoffs, and as I mentioned, last year, 2 of his 3 wins during his championship season came during the playoffs. So now it was time to go for that 24 car. It was time to establish, hey, I've been running consistent. Yeah, I haven't been to victory lane, but if you're going to take this championship trophy here in season 51, you're going to have to go through the defending champ. And a statement race here tonight for him, no doubt, 1 week after clinching the regular season championship.
Well, not only does that lock him into the next round, that's also going to give him bonus points. So he's going to get a double bonus, essentially. He's going to have even more of a leg up. Again, we mentioned coming into the race, all those points, that big giant point lead that he had got erased. So to come out here in race number 1 of the chase here, that's got to be a really, really good feeling for him, the 24. Teammate Bob Simonera, he's probably going to finish second unofficially as they run. So that top 2 in points going to remain your top 2 in points. Bernie Mobbs will likely pick up maybe another position in the points, but Chuck McClure, I don't think we're going to see any major shakeups with the exception of the 88 of Grant Wesley at this time.
Yeah, Wesley and possibly Jessica Shelton as well. They came into this race 4th and 5th in the standings, but right now, just based on the drivers, as the drivers now take the white flag, just based on the drivers that were around that cut line coming into tonight's race, you had Josh Metallic, Dante Ricky, Mark Paglia. They're all finishing in rather close proximity in the finishing results here tonight. So it's going to be really close as drivers fight for those final 6 spots into the next round next week.
Well, and that was kind of the whole reason that these new systems were put into place was, to build a little bit more excitement and a little bit more drama. So heading into the final 5 races of the season, there's not a guy like Joe DeSpirito coming in with a major point lead, and it's just like, okay, well, we know he's just out here trying to ride around, not get bad finishes, not wreck out, and that's exactly what it does. It's great for us to watch, but for those drivers that got to live through that, man, that's not the greatest feeling in the world. You don't want to be on or around that bubble line. Again, it's Talladega. A lot of things could happen that are out of your control. So next week going to be another very important race for these playoffs. But there's going to be a couple drivers now that are going to be a little bit more comfortable as we head toward that point.
And how about a couple of these drivers that are our playoff contenders that had some comeback runs? Chuck McClure, we talked about him having that spin onto pit road, battled his way back up to finish sixth. And Billy Elliser, who was looking like if this thing went green to the end, was going to finish somewhere in the 21st, 22nd position. He got the caution he needed, worked his way back up through the field. He's going to finish with a top 5 run here tonight. The guy who came in the number 10 seed out of the 10 playoff drivers.
Yeah, and that's one of those cases of kind of put your money where your mouth is, and he did exactly that tonight. That's going to put him in a much better spot in the points as they leave tonight's race. Let's give a couple shout outs, a couple honorable mentions. Bobby Farrell in the 45 unofficially, he's going to finish 7th. Jeff Crivello unofficially going to finish 8th, and Bob Dixon in the 143 car unofficially going to finish 9th. Those 3 drivers not in playoff contention, as well as the 77 of Donnie Garrett. So, it's kind of as we suspected. Those non-playoff drivers still racing just as hard as they would if they were in the playoffs and netting them decent results here at the end of the night.
Joe DeSpirito going to cross the line, officially picking up his first win of the season. We spent 10 weeks wondering when we were going to say those words, as he has been one of the most consistent drivers all year long. But finally, that 24 is back in victory lane. He'll advance into the round of 7. And I have a feeling this may be a very long celebration burnout, because it's been a long time coming for that Exalted Chevy Camaro.
Well, and in practice, he parked the nose up of that car up against the wall at the start-finish line. Maybe a little bit of calling a shot. We'll have to ask him about that here when we interview him here shortly. So I'll be interested in seeing if he doesn't do the same thing, but I wouldn't be surprised. We saw last week the winner blow up his motor, Dante Ricky, in his victory celebration. I wouldn't be surprised to see Joe DeSpirito do the same thing in the 24.
DeSpirito brings his number 24 machine out of turn 4, heading for the start-finish line. Let's look at the official results from tonight's event. Basically gave you through the top 5. We mentioned Chuck McClure there in 6th. Bobby Farrell, you mentioned him too. Bobby's got to run all the laps, because it seems like every race where he runs the full distance, that 45 comes away with really good results. A lot of his poor finishes have been due to the fact that he's gotten onto the track about 15, 20 laps after going green, but he's very good at being consistent with his runs. Crivello going to finish solidly in 8th, with Bob Dixon 9th, and Josh Metallic, who came in the driver tonight that everyone was hunting for, that 7th spot in the standings, he'll finish in the top 10. Dante Ricky will finish in 11th. Another comeback driver, Richard Martin, who had pit road problems, in 12th. Dave Melson 13th. Mark Paglia will finish back in 14th, so he's going to be down there maybe close to that cut line heading into next week, as he came in the number 8 seed. Jerm Lewis will finish in the top 15, followed by Wiley Coate, Chris Elliott, Cy Jones, Rodney Sullins, and Glenn Harris. A number of cautions that came out late helped to put a number of drivers back on the lead lap. So Robbie Nisus, Grant Wesley, Jessica Shelton, and Tim Knofsker will complete the drivers on the lead lap, and only one driver finished a lap down. That was Manny D. He actually officially finished this race on the lead lap, technically, because he would have been the lucky dog under this last caution. Has him scored 2 laps down because he crossed the line ahead of the leader, but we'll just ignore that as we look at the drivers that did not complete this race. Perry Bond had some internet problems. John Godfrey, not certain what really happened to the 7-Eleven, but he'll finish in 27th. Doug Woolley, 28th. Stefan Martel in 29th, and Chris Emery had a mechanical problem about 10 laps into this race. He'll finish in the 30th position.
Well, Seth, coming into the night, I think we pretty much commented the last few weeks, having felt like, the guys that were the top 10 in points and were heading into the chase were the guys that should have been there, with the exception of the 88 of Grant Wesley and Jessica Shelton tonight, who had some troubles late in the going in this race. I think we saw exactly that. We saw all of our chase drivers up toward the front of the field all night long. A lot of really good, hard, clean racing. We saw guys door banging a little bit, but didn't lead to any major incident. A lot of respect shown out here on the racetrack, as we always see. And Joe DeSpirito coming away with it. So race number 11 for DeSpirito. This is a stat we'll have to throw at him when we talk to him. In 11 races for Joe DeSpirito, that is 8 top 5s, 11 total top 10s. So this is what's got him in championship form coming into the chase, and he will lead the point leader again here tonight. He's going to be a real force to be reckoned with here the rest of the season.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. Donnie Garrett's going to finish third place here tonight. We're going to interview him in just a moment, but man, his last couple of weeks, he has been up there in the conversation. 2 weeks ago, he was involved in a wreck while leading the race coming off turn 2 on the final lap. And then last week, he ran out of fuel through 3 and 4 on the final lap. Here tonight, he finally gets a podium finish, finishing in third. And we're going to talk with him right now. Hey, Donnie, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
I got you guys. What's going on?
Well, I mean, we just documented that you were up in the conversation for the win the last 2 weeks. Circumstances not working out to your favor. You almost pulled it off here tonight. You were leading out of turn 4 through the tri-oval, coming to that caution flag. You had the 24 and the 712 there behind you. Was there just too much momentum for you to throw a block?
Well, you had 90 there with them too, and I mean that's the Florida gang. It's all 3 of them, and I didn't want to ruin their race. I mean, I could have went up there and kind of tapped him a little bit, but he knows I don't drive like that, and so congratulations to him. But yeah, with the 3 of them, there was no way I could hold them off, and I was hoping maybe we'd get a 1-lap shootout there, and it didn't come. But I'll take third. That's my best finish of the season, of a dismal season, I should say. And just man, I just don't have seasons like this. First time I've ever missed a chase, and it's embarrassing. But hey, good run tonight, and now it's time to kind of set myself ready for next season and get some decent finishes out of this stuff.
Yeah, we've seen, obviously, as we mentioned, you were in the conversation the past 2 weeks. You were in the conversation here. Do you get the feeling that you may be able to get a win here before the season's end? And what little bit more do you think you have to do to have yourself in that position?
Well, I ain't got nothing to lose. So these guys for the chase, I mean, they got to keep that in the back of their mind when they make them moves. Hey, Donnie Garrett's underneath me or above me or whatever, and he ain't got nothing to lose. So they're gonna race me a little different. They're gonna be a little bit more conservative because they know that they got, you get in a wreck and you're sitting in second, you got a nice second place finish, or you get in a wreck and you go to the back. What do you take? And a lot of these guys, they're smart. They're gonna take that. So I can lay on them a little bit more and pick on them a little bit more, at the end of these races, and try to get a good finish. But I'm respectful. I mean, I was warping a little bit there at the beginning. I jumped out of the line right there on the start and went to the back and just got out of the way. I don't want to be that guy that would cause a wreck or anything like that. So, but worked my way back up through there. Just kind of sat there all night and just waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally got the chance to go and win, and got a good finish out of it.
Hey, Donnie, it's Zach up here in the booth. Hey, man, I've been waiting all season to talk to you, expecting, before week 11 to be able to talk to you. But, man, it's just been, like you mentioned, an abysmal season. But, if you take a look back on it, a lot of it not of your own doing. Maybe a couple incidents where, like last week, you ran out of fuel and things like that, where, it kind of just puts you in a bad spot where you weren't able to pull that off. But I've got to ask you, for everybody that might not realize it, because I already know the answer to this, but what kind of toll does that take on you mentally when we all know that you can win? I know that you can win on these super speedways. All of your competitors out there know that you can win on these super speedways, but week after week after week, you seem to run into brick walls and find yourself in trouble. And to finally get yourself a third place finish here tonight, what kind of a roller coaster is that to go through?
I tell you, the pressure is, I've never felt the pressure like this before. To try to get, it's so competitive. I mean, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've not seen the competitive. I mean, I'd put us Thursday night guys against anybody in the country and on super speedways, and the pressure. I mean, it's inches. I mean, it just out there. It's just so tight. And I mean, all these guys are good. I mean, and went back years ago, there was 4 or 5 guys out of a 30-car field that could win a race. Now, out of 30 cars, 29 of them can win. And I mean, it's just, the pressure is just so high. And I said that, I think y'all interviewed me first this year when we started this, and I said, look, it's going to build. This excitement and this craziness is going to build and build and build and build. And I tell you, some of these races, man, I got off. I take a shower before the race. I got to take a shower after the race because I am drenched, man. You're focusing so much for so long because you have to. If you don't, you're going to get shoved out. And these guys are amazing, man. They're great drivers.
All right, Donnie. So on the flip side of that, with this solid top three, and we know how fast that you are every week, how much confidence does this give you working forward? You don't have to worry about points. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff that the rest of this field is stressing out about. How much easier does this make this to just kind of look forward and say, okay, we finally got a little bit of the monkey off our back here. Let's make some progress and get a win or two before the season's over.
Oh yeah, yeah. You got to set a precedence for next year and next season. And I was one of those guys that dominated for a while. And when you do that, you get a target on you. And I think Joe's starting to get that target now, even though he's still winning a lot of races. But if you look through that race, you notice how those three always get hung out, and it's because they win so much and they finish up front. It was me and those three finished up front, and they're good. I mean, those damn Florida guys are good. You got to admit it. And um, but yeah, no pressure. I mean, there's no pressure. I don't want to hurt none of those guys. I don't want to do anything that's going to screw them up. But I'm here to prove a point that hey, the old man can still do it, and I'm going to win a race before the end of this season. I promise you.
All right, way to go on your podium here tonight, Donnie. Thank you. Sponsors, shout outs. What do you got for us?
Oh man, got to give it up to all the ownership and admin over here. Um, just a great place to race, man. It just been racing here for years. Yeah, I wouldn't race anywhere else. Sometimes I'll venture out, a little bit, but I always come back and always race here all the time, man. It's the best out there. And I want to give up a big shout out to my sponsor, Astroglide, helped me slip through the field, and we got her done.
Well, Donnie, congratulations on a great performance here tonight. Your fourth top 10, your first top 5 of the season. And yeah, we just get the feeling that sooner or later we're going to see that 77 car in victory lane just based on the fact you've been up there in the conversation week after week after week. So sooner or later, the stars have got to align for you to be able to get that 77 in victory lane. But congrats on a great run here tonight, and we look forward to seeing what you do next week.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. As always, thank you guys for your broadcast, and you guys do a great job, and can't wait till next season.
See if we can now get our second place finisher, a driver that's going to have himself in a fairly comfortable situation, I think, heading into the elimination race next week, and that is two-time winner Bob Seminara. Hey, Bob, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Yeah, what's up, guys?
Well, I know that coming off of turn 4, you probably were a little bit conflicted. You wanted to try and help push that 24 to victory lane so all three of you Florida boys would have a win this season, but at the same time, he's a competitor for that championship against you. Was there a point where you thought, maybe I might try taking this 77 3 wide and get this win myself?
I don't know about 3 wide, but I didn't know if they were going to get together or not. So I had my eyes open. Of course, we like to push Joe to the win there. He needed one this year, but we're right there. Anything could have happened.
We know that you're a 2-time winner this season. We talked about the fact that the past 2 weeks coming into this playoffs, you had the pedal problem, never got back in the lead lap. And then, of course, last week you were without third gear. Does something like that stick in the back of your mind when you start the playoffs, or do you have to just completely erase that out of your mind and kind of focus on this as maybe a brand new season since the playoff points were all reformatted?
Oh, no, that was on my mind. I needed a good run because I had those 2 problems and then wrecked out while I was running third the other week, and got 19th. So I had 3 bad runs there. So needed a top 5 tonight, get the playoffs started. So it was a good race, and I'll take it. I'll take second.
Hey, Bob, Zach, congratulations on your second place. As Seth mentioned, have had quite a few good runs this season. You had 5 top 5s with a 7 top 10 season, tonight being your 5th top 5. Really good runs. How does this set you up? Does this give you a lot of confidence heading into next week?
Yeah, hey, Zach. Yeah, it's all good. We're back in the saddle. Been fast every week when the pedals and the gears are there, so it's fun. It was a good fun race tonight too.
All right. And one last question that I have for you. Leaving last week, leaving the regular season, Joe had almost a 50-point lead over you, but that was trimmed down to 3 points coming into the night. Unofficially, after the finish tonight, with you finishing second to him, you are just 8 points back. Now, I have to ask you, you and Joe DeSpirito being teammates, do you do anything differently through the playoff races than what you would do helping each other regularly through the regular season? Because now, yes, this is your teammate, but now you also have a chance to, really take advantage of that point gap being cut down between the two of you. Obviously, with him getting the win this week, he gets just a little bit of advantage, but we know that you can get these wins too. How do you race each other differently at all, if at all?
Yeah, I look at it like 3 bad runs. I really only lost 3 points because I was second in points. I fell to third. It only cost me 3 points, playoff wise. So, no, we're going to keep doing the same thing. I mean, circumstances control stuff too. But, we still got 4 more races. So we got to be there at the end.
All right, Bob. Again, congratulations on your second place finish tonight. Been fun watching you all season. Sponsors, thank you. Shout outs.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, I'd like to thank FRN putting these on. This is awesome. I love being able to go back and watch it. And I got buddies at work that watch and some family. I'd like to thank RTG, the best server around, Rolling Thunder, best around. Tally Challenge. Joe, Bernie, everybody. Had a good race tonight. We'll see you next week.
Well, that's Bob Seminara. Started second, finishes second here tonight in the season opener of the playoffs at Talladega Superspeedway. We'll look forward to seeing what you can do next week to try and lock yourself into the round of 7, Bob. But congrats on a great run here tonight.
All right, thank you.
All right, last but not least, let's go down to victory lane for the first time this season. Joe DeSpirito in the winner's circle. Hey, Joe, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Hey guys, I got you. How you doing?
Well, I'll tell you what. The word that we probably had in capital, bold, underlined letters when you crossed that start-finish line was finally. I mean, you have been so close. You've been the most consistent driver all season, but you've just had that checkered flag eluding you race after race after race. First race of the playoffs, you're locked into the round of 7, your first win of the season. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, trying to get that monkey off my back. I mean, the goal tonight wasn't 100% to get a win for the playoffs. It was really just to get a win off my back. I've been hungry for that. So yeah, I got one finally this year, and I'm happy.
We talked about the fact last season you won the championship. 2 of your 3 wins took place during the playoffs. So having your first win happen here as the playoffs begin, does that give you confidence to be able to go back to back as far as the championships is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, it does give me some confidence. Last week I had the lead on the last lap, and I kind of choked there, and that was kind of a lesson learned there. And you got to peak at the right times. I kind of talk about golf with this. The 4 major tournaments every year, the golfers try to peak at the right times for those specific major tournaments, and you got to peak right at the right time during the playoffs and the championship here at RTG at the Tally Challenge. So, well, I peaked last year, and I'm trying to do it again this year. So, yeah, next week I got a little bit of a cushion with the points, and it's almost like a race off, but we'll see what happens. Try to put out a good showing.
Hey, Joe, Zach, congratulations on finally getting that victory, man. 11 races into the season, 8 top fives, 8 pole positions, 11 top 10 finishes. Not one race that you finished outside of that top 10, but finally being able to get that win tonight. How big is that, especially considering you saw a 50-point lead essentially evaporate last week and turn into just a 3-point lead coming into tonight's race?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's just a confidence booster. I wanted to get that off my back. I almost forgot what it was like to win. It's been a little while. So yeah, good confidence booster. Got to thank my guys, man. They helped me out there at the end. Me and Donnie had a little race to the line there at the end, and it worked out very tight, and very fun race. And luckily, the cautions came out at the right times as far as fuel mileage. It could have been a fuel mileage race, but it didn't end up being that way. So yeah, it all worked out though. Got the W.
Okay, Joe, I'm going to pose a similar question to you as what I posed to Bob Seminara just a couple weeks ago. Now, we know you Florida gang, you all work together. We know your teammates. However, with the two of you finishing 1-2 tonight and being currently 1-2 in the point standings, how do you race each other differently going forward, especially as you work your way down toward the end of this playoff race here? What do you do different? Because you don't want to leave your teammates hanging. You want to always help your teammates, but what do you have to do differently to try to get that little bit of an edge over those other two drivers around you?
Yeah, we're just gonna keep it rolling. Same thing. Rinse, repeat. It's been working, and we're just gonna keep doing it. And whoever comes out on top at the end comes out on top at the end. Uh, just race hard, race together, good communication, and yeah, like I said, just keep doing what we're doing. We're racing good and finishing good, finishing clean. Top fives, top tens, starting on the pole. So that's just rinse, repeat, man.
All right. Congratulations, John. Finally getting that W into the column. Who do you got for sponsors, thank yous, and shout outs tonight?
I want to give a shout out, as always, to my boys Bernie and Bob. I want to give a shout out to Josh Metallic. He runs a great Thursday night series here. Did a great job with the points, the new points format this year, and yeah, he does a good show. He puts on a good show as far as keeping everything together, keeping everything clean and organized, and explaining the rules very well to everybody. So shout out to him, RTG, you guys at FRN, everybody watching, all my guys watching on YouTube, and yeah, thanks again, guys. Very fun, great race.
Well, we know one of the 7 drivers moving on to the next round of the playoffs. The defending champ, Joe DeSpirito, gets his first win of the season here tonight in chase race number 1. Once again, congratulations, Joe. Well deserved. Long time coming. Go and enjoy it.
Appreciate it, guys. Good night.
And the point standings, I believe you already alluded to this, Zach, are in. And man, is it going to be a close battle next week as 6 more drivers look to race their way into the next round. We know DeSpirito's locked in. Bob Seminara looks pretty safe. He's 27 points ahead of the cut line. Chuck McClure might be safe, depending on how many drivers are in next week's field. He's 20 points ahead of the cut line. But then you go down 4th place down to 10th. You've got Dante Ricky. He's +8. Bernie Mobbs is +3. Grant Wesley and Josh Metallic right now have to figure out who is 6th and who is 7th because they're tied currently at 546 points apiece, I should say. And then the drivers behind them, Jessica Shelton -4, Billy Elliser -4, and Mark Paglia -7. We know what Talladega's capable of doing. You can lose double digits in the point stands in terms of finishing results. Next week's going to be a hairy one for a number of these drivers just ahead, just on, or just below that cut line.
Yeah, and when you look at it, there's only 7-point difference between that 7th place point position and that 10th place. Mark Paglia with a 14th place finish. You wouldn't have figured he would have lost a lot of ground in the points, but actually lost 2 positions. He falls to 10th in points, 42 points behind Joe DeSpirito. So Jessica Shelton, Billy Ellisor, and Mark Paglia really going to have good, strong showings next week to put themselves in that top 7 in points. But I think the top 3, most likely the most comfortable drivers on the field at this point. And again, it's like we've talked about, like I said earlier, Seth, most of the last 3 or 4 weeks, these drivers are pretty much the ones that we expected to be toward the top come playoff time. They're the ones that have performed every single week. They've been the most consistent, and they've been the guys that have been competing for wins the most. Jessica Shelton, we thought she was going to have a really, really good run before the end of the race. We saw her up in the top 3, top 5, many points of the race tonight. She's now sitting 8th in points, 4 points behind that 7th place cutoff position with Josh Metallic.
Yeah, Grant Wesley as well, finishing back there towards the rear of the field, getting caught up in that late race caution. He was 4th in the points coming into tonight. He now finds himself down right on that cut line, tied with Josh Metallic. So let's say you're one of these drivers that's in that position where you could either move in or very easily fall out and be eliminated next week. Do you go into that elimination race with the mentality of I've got to be aggressive and stay at the front ahead of the trouble? Or do you maybe adopt the strategy we saw Dante Ricky employ quite a bit during the regular season? Ride towards the back, try and stay out of trouble, be a little bit more conservative, trying to keep the car in one piece until it's go time with maybe about 10 laps to go.
I think whatever your strategy is, the forefront of your mind is just making it to the checkered flag. With as tight as these points are right now, only 15 points separating 4th through 10th. That's a very narrow margin, especially when you think about super speedway racing, the types of incidents that can take place here, the number of cars that it can take out at any given time. I mean, it's very feasible that you have a 30-car field and 20 cars get taken out within the first half of the race. So you don't want to be in that position. You've got to finish well. You've got to make sure you just keep your car out of trouble and just try to be as consistent as possible. Now, I think it's very interesting if you look at that 10th place with Mark Paglia. That's a guy that we saw that worked really, really hard to get himself into the playoffs. And he ended up, at the second half of the season, super consistent. So we know that he can do that. Guys like Billy Ellis or Jess Shelton, a young lady herself there, also drivers that could find them wow, words are hard, back into the top 7 in points, but it's all going to depend on what happens throughout the course of those 66 laps.
Well, we said tonight the stage was going to be set for the elimination race. We now know the players, we now know the positions. Next week, Talladega once again is going to play its part into determining who the other 6 drivers are going to be that will join Joe DeSpirito in the round of 7. But that will take place next week. DeSpirito tonight is your race winner for the first time here in season 51 for the Tally Challenge. Had to wait a while, but finally gets one. Zach, it's been a crazy one here tonight. Looking forward to the scenarios we've got going into next week. Going to be having to work the calculator quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you what, here in Western New York, Seth, temperatures have dipped below freezing for the first time this year, but the racing at Talladega tonight, hot and heavy, keeping everything exciting and fun to watch on the racetrack. Just a few more weeks left before we crown a championship here. All the drivers on edge are going to be working as hard as they can, with the exception of that number 24 of Joe DeSpirito, the car that we've seen be the most consistent so far this season. Going to be a lot of fun to watch to see what happens from here. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, is it possible to go into a Talladega race worry-free? Well, Joe DeSpirito's the only driver that gets that luxury next week. We appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight to the first playoff race of season 51 of the RTG Talladega Challenge. We hope that you guys enjoyed it. Next week, as we said, we whittled the field down from 10 to 7 at the drop of the checkered flag. That'll be green flag, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Thursday night. But until then, for Zach Freemount, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening as you've been watching another broadcast tonight, courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.